Quentin Nash hated mornings, especially ones that involved freezing wind, stiff boots, and a diplomatic assignment to an alien research vessel orbiting a moon he couldn't pronounce without a sore throat. The ship, Zalari class by Earth records, was named the Vireem and hung above the sulfur-speckled horizon of the moon like a silver scar. He adjusted his jacket's collar as the docking bay hissed open, revealing a corridor lit in faint aquamarine. The air smelled faintly of hot plastic and boiled mushrooms. A tall creature met him halfway down the corridor. It had translucent skin, a narrow face, and eyes like polished copper. Its name was Jor, the Vireem's chief xenopsychologist. "Ambassador Nash," Jor said, tone neutral but not unfriendly. "Quentin's fine," he replied, tugging his duffel bag higher on his shoulder. "Ambassador makes me feel like I should be 60 and wearing a sash." Jor blinked its species version of a nod. Then Quentin. "Your living quarters are prepared. We begin the cultural exchange tomorrow. For now, acclimate." "Sounds good, and thanks for the invite. Earth's been curious about the Vireem ever since your last visit." He paused, then added, "You're taller than I expected." Jor didn't react. "Our gravity is 0.8 Earth standard. Your species will find movement easier here, but potentially disorienting." "Disorientation's my middle name," Quentin muttered, stepping into the lift. The week that followed was a flurry of structured chaos interviews, demonstrations, shared meals, of which Quentin politely declined most, and attempts to explain concepts like sarcasm, dark humor, and why humans voluntarily watch horror movies. Jor was his main liaison, observing him like a scientist might a raccoon trying to assemble a Rubik's Cube. On the 8th day, Jor invited Quentin to an observation deck above the moon's surface. The gravity felt just light enough to make him feel like he was always half a step from falling. "Your physiology appears inefficient for survival," Jor remarked while peering at a holographic display of human musculature. "Yet your species thrives." "Why?" Quentin rubbed the back of his neck. "We adapt or we die trying." Jor tilted its head. "You stubbed your toe yesterday." "You emitted a guttural sound, then claimed to be fine." Quentin laughed, caught off guard. Yeah, I just whacked it against the edge of the bunk. Hurts like hell, sure, but it wasn't broken." You growled, then smiled. "It's a reflex. We try to downplay pain sometimes." "Keeps the mood light," Jor stared. "You were in pain, yet you smiled." "I was trying not to wake your crew." Jor didn't respond immediately. Instead, it gestured toward the ramp leading to the geological wing. "Come. There's a cavern beneath the moon's crust. It exhibits seismic instability. We've been cautious, but your reaction may offer insight." "Wait, you want to take me into a potential cave-in?" "Only the outer ring. It is structurally stable, mostly." "Sure," Quentin said dryly. "Let me just grab my helmet and my bad decisions." The descent into the cavern began smoothly. Jor handed him a pair of magnetic boots and a translator headset before guiding him into a narrow, dark hallway carved from volcanic rock. Red warning lights blinked softly along the walls. "You said mostly stable, right?" Quentin asked, gripping the handrail. "Yes. This area has held for 6 lunar cycles." "Convenient," he muttered, stepping carefully over a raised metal beam embedded in the floor. As they entered the cavern, the temperature dropped. Crystalline formations jutted from the ceiling like frozen stalactites. The ground shimmered with mineral deposits. "It's beautiful," Quentin said. Jor nodded. "We believe this chamber formed from tectonic compression and thermal collapse, but we have been wary of vibrations." Quentin knelt to examine a mineral cluster, pulling out a handheld scanner. "You ever tested for reactive compounds in these things?" Before Jor could answer, the ground beneath Quentin's left foot shifted. The metal beam he'd stepped over earlier had vibrated loose. His foot slipped, catching on the edge. He stumbled forward, arms windmilling, and slammed his bare toe hard on a jagged piece of rock. "Ga son of," he doubled over, teeth clenched, face twisted in pain. Jor flinched. "Injury?" Quentin straightened slowly, breathing through his nose. "I'm fine. Just stubbed my toe." You are not fine, you growled again. It's a human thing, pain, noise. You are limping. Yeah, okay, it hurts, but it's not broken, I think. Jor stared at him, then activated its calm. Medical scan required. Possible skeletal damage. I can walk. You are inefficient, yet resilient. This is contradictory. Back in the medbay, a technician scanned Quentin's foot. The screen lit up with a small fracture across the proximal phalanx. Fracture confirmed, the technician said. Quentin sighed. Guess I'll be hobbling for a while. Jor watched as the technician applied a stabilizing brace. You minimized the severity. Why? Because I didn't want to make it a big deal. It's embarrassing to get injured by a rock when you're supposed to be representing your whole species. Pain is not weakness, it is data. Quentin gave a tired laugh. Try explaining that to my pride. Over the next few days, Quentin moved slower. The Vireem crew offered assistance, some more awkwardly than others. He declined most of it, though he appreciated the gesture. Jor followed him closely, making notes, always watching. On the 12th day, Jor invited him to a demonstration chamber where the crew practiced adaptive response scenarios. A simulation involved a corridor flooding with caustic gas. We wish to understand stress response, Jor explained. Great. Nothing says fun afternoon like simulated death. The moment the gas simulation began, Quentin's eyes watered, and his lungs burned with artificial sting. He grabbed the emergency mask, stumbled, and made it to the exit in under 30 seconds. As he exited the chamber, Jor met him with a question. You hesitated only once. Why? There was a kid back home, Quentin said, coughing. Got trapped in a fire. I hesitated then too, almost cost him his life. I don't let myself freeze anymore. Jor made a low sound in its throat. You adapt from trauma. Most of us do, or we don't make it far. Later that evening, Quentin sat on the observation deck, watching the moon's horizon burn orange against the vacuum. His foot throbbed lightly in its brace. Jor joined him, silent at first. Do you think your species exaggerates its capabilities? Jor finally asked. Sometimes. But we also underestimate ourselves too. We joke, we laugh off pain because we're scared, but we keep going. That's the real trick. You smiled when injured, lied about your condition, yet you continue. Yeah, that's kind of our thing. Jor was quiet for a moment. If I stubbed my foot on a rock, I would demand medical attention immediately. Quentin chuckled. You'd be smarter than me. The brace came off after 5 weeks. A second scan confirmed healing. He'd followed instructions, iced the swelling, and mostly stayed off it. The Vireem crew had watched carefully, fascinated by the slow but steady biological repair. Jor presented him with a small crystal from the cavern before his departure. A token. Of the moment your toe revealed more about your species than any interview. Quentin accepted it, laughing. You're never gonna let me live that down, are you? No, Jor said, but you smiled, so I assume you are fine. The galley on Deck 3 wasn't built for humans. The ceiling dipped, just low enough that Quentin had to duck under the archway. And the chairs, if they could be called chairs, resembled inverted tuning forks with cushioning where none was needed. He perched sideways on one, his foot elevated across a low console table lined with nutrient paste containers that shimmered like melted crayons. A Vireem technician named Tarl hovered nearby, watching him sip lukewarm water from a curved vessel that was clearly not designed for lips. You consume unstructured hydrogen-oxygen compound, Tarl said without preface. Without filtration or enzyme enhancement. It's just water, Quentin replied, cautiously tipping the cup again. Kind of the cornerstone of life on Earth. Unaugmented fluids compromise nutrient efficacy. Maybe, he said, but they don't burn your throat and smell like fish. He set the cup down. No offense. Tarl made a clicking sound, possibly amusement. Your skeletal injury has repaired at a standard pace, without regenerative acceleration. We don't really have that, Quentin said. We just heal, takes time, rest, sometimes metal pins. Sometimes stubbornness. Your species tolerates inefficiency with remarkable indifference. That's one way to put it, he said, shifting his foot slightly. It still hurt if he moved it wrong, but the swelling had gone down. We kind of accept pain as part of the deal. Tarl tapped a console with one long digit, pulling up a projection of a human foot, annotated with small glyphs. You endured microfracture without sedation. Why not request chemical numbing? Didn't think I needed it. You were incorrect. Yeah, Quentin muttered, but it felt like cheating. Tarl tilted their head. You equate pain tolerance with virtue, he raised an eyebrow. Not exactly, more like. Proving to yourself you can take it. Tarl blinked slowly. Fascinatingly inefficient, Quentin grinned. You keep saying that like it's a bad thing. 3 days later, Quentin found himself sitting through a Vireem emergency preparedness drill. The main briefing room was dim, shaped like a spiral shell, and filled with thin-bodied aliens tapping at consoles or standing in silent clusters. Everyone wore emergency harnesses that resembled moss-covered life jackets, and Quentin was handed one with extra straps to account for his asymmetrical thorax. He buckled it as Jor approached. We simulate hull breach, Jor explained, to monitor instinctive responses. Good, Quentin said. Because nothing screams instinct like organized drills. This is a controlled environment. You will not be harmed. That's what they said about roller coasters. Jor didn't inquire. The drill began with a low-frequency alarm that vibrated in Quentin's chest. Lights dimmed to a pulse blue and the floor underfoot trembled to simulate impact. Decompression imminent, a synthetic voice announced. Quentin grabbed the nearest support rail and ducked, automatically checking the emergency mask at his hip. It was their clear visor, self-sealing, good seal. He had no idea how it worked, but it looked intuitive. He kept low, scanning the exits. Jor watched him. You are not panicking. I've been on planes that dropped altitude faster. You exhibit procedural behavior without prompting. Habit, he said. Drills in school, fire alarms. Earthquakes, we get used to reacting. Yet you are alone here, no conspecifics to emulate. Don't need a crowd to know how to breathe through chaos. Jor stepped closer as the simulation ended and the lights returned to amber. You would not survive actual hull rupture, Jor said calmly. Not planning on testing that, Quentin replied. Later that rotation, Quentin lay on his bunk, one knee propped, reading through Vireem cultural data on a tablet. The text glowed faint green and the syntax shifted depending on his comprehension speed. It was a clever design, adaptive language modeling, but it gave him a headache after half an hour. The door chimed. He didn't answer, assuming it was another system check. The door opened anyway. Jor entered without ceremony. You requested access to the Vireem Bioethics Archive. That I did, Quentin nodded. Hoping to understand how you all think about risk and sacrifice. Jor remained standing. There is no direct analog to your concept of sacrifice. We avoid irrecoverable loss. Quentin tilted his head. You mean you never risk lives? Correct. So, what happens if someone has to put themselves in danger to save others? It is considered a failure of planning. He sat up. But what if there's no time to plan? There is always time, Jor said. Your species romanticizes impulsive self-endangerment. Sometimes it's the only option. Such logic is contrary to our structure. Quentin folded his arms. You ever seen someone drown? Jor's body shifted slightly warily. No. I have. Lake Michigan summer, kid went under. I didn't think, I just jumped. I'm not a swimmer. Nearly choked on water trying to reach him. Jor was still. We both made it, Quentin added, but if I'd waited for a plan. He wouldn't have. That was inefficient. That was human. Jor stood quietly for a long moment before turning toward the door. Your species mistakes instinct for nobility. Quentin looked back at his tablet. One doesn't cancel out the other. 3 rotations later, Quentin was invited to witness an exobiology procedure, a Vireem crew member undergoing neural mapping. He was told it was non-invasive. The med bay was chilly and smelled of antiseptic moss. A thin sheet of gel covered the subject's skull, through which a lattice of light pulses moved in rhythmic patterns. Jor hovered beside him, arms folded. This allows us to scan for cognitive degradation, Jor said. Before symptoms manifest, Quentin nodded. We've got MRIs, CAT scans. Similar idea. Does your species regularly monitor cerebral function? Only if there's a problem, Jor blinked. Then how do you anticipate degeneration? We usually don't, Quentin said, watching the lights flicker. We wait for signs, forgetfulness, mood shifts. Then we react. Jor was silent. The Vireem subject turned their heads slightly, eyes fluttering behind translucent lids. The scan ended with a soft chime and a medtech applied a cooling salve. Procedure complete, Jor said. Quentin gestured toward the scan. How much of your decisions rely on data like that? 82%, and the other 18% calculated intuition. See, Quentin said, that's where we differ. We run mostly on gut. Jor stared at him. Your abdominal region possesses no cognitive function. It's a figure of speech, Jor paused. Your species relies on unreliable feedback mechanisms. Yup, and yet here we are, walking, talking, and occasionally stubbing our toes. Jor tilted their head. Still referencing trauma. Just a callback. 2 days after that, Quentin joined a small survey team heading to the moon's surface. The shuttle was cramped, air recycled with an edge of ozone, and the pilot, a Vireem named Olt, navigated with a fluid grace that made Quentin slightly nauseous. They landed beneath a jagged ridge, pale dust scattering under the landing gear. The gravity was lighter here, and Quentin felt like a balloon tethered by his boots. As they trekked toward a mineral outcrop, Olt paused and gestured toward a crevice. There is a fissure, Olt said. Unstable. Do not approach. Got it, Quentin said, stepping wide of the marked zone. As the team collected samples, a tremor hit brief, sharp, and gone in seconds. A container tumbled from a ledge, bounced once, and skidded toward the fissure. Olt moved to stop it, but hesitated. Quentin didn't. He lunged, caught the container mid-slide, and skidded to a halt just short of the drop. His shoulder slammed into the rock. Dust filled his mouth. Are you damaged? Olt asked, reaching down. Just bruised, Quentin coughed, offering the container. Didn't want to lose your samples. Olt took it with slow fingers. That was an uncalculated risk. Yeah, but worth it. Back aboard the shuttle, Jor met him with narrowed eyes. You continue to surprise us, Jor said. I'm not trying to. Then your nature is more alarming than your intent. Quentin leaned back, shoulder aching. That's the human brand, alarming, unintentional, and weirdly persistent, Jor exhaled through their neck vents. We are still compiling your psychological profile. Good luck with that, Quentin said. Even we don't fully get us. Jor nodded once. That may be your most universal trait. The door to the biome lab hissed open at precisely second shift, and Quentin stepped in with a slight limp. His left boot now modified with a gel insert the Vireem had engineered after observing his gait for several days. The room was warmer than most others on the ship, humid, and lined with vertical growth pods containing flora from over a dozen worlds. A faint citrus scent hung in the air, coming from a moss cluster pulsing gently with bioluminescence. You are late, said Harish, the Vireem agronomic specialist, without turning from the root system it was examining. 7 minutes, Quentin said, wiping a bead of sweat from his temple. I got stopped by one of your sanitation bots. It tried to scan my face for spores. That unit is not authorized for biometric analysis. Well, it did it anyway. Might want to check its firmware. Harish finally turned, its limbs rearranging with the grace of poured syrup. You were invited to observe crop viability under lunar light filtration. Your punctuality is expected. Quentin stepped closer, peering into the transparent side of a hydroponic tray. I'm here, aren't I? And technically, you invited me because I asked too many questions yesterday. You misunderstood. I invited you because your presence creates unpredictable variables. Harish gestured to a tray of curled leaves. These are native to your terra. Brassica oleracea, kale, Quentin said. Tastes like punishment. They have ceased nutrient uptake, he leaned in. Looks like root rot, too much moisture, not enough oxygen. That contradicts our irrigation schedule. Yeah, well, your schedule wasn't designed for earth plants. Harish blinked both sets of eyes slowly. Explain. Back home, we water from the bottom and let the roots breathe. You're flooding them. Try lifting the trays and letting them dry between cycles. Harish moved to a control panel and adjusted the flow regulator. You are not a botanist. No, but I had a houseplant once. Same thing, Harish stared. You extrapolated interstellar agriculture from a domestic decorative organism? Yep, that is unsound methodology. Worked though. An hour later, they stood before a vertical pod hosting a sluggish vine. Its leaves were speckled with gray patches. This one's from Harnett V, right? Quentin asked. Yes, it thrives in acidic soil with minimal sunlight. It's not the soil, he said, adjusting the lamp's angle. You're hitting it with full-spectrum light. It's probably reacting to the UV range. Harish narrowed its gaze. We calibrated for optimum growth. That was optimum for your species' crops, not alien ones. You are suggesting species-specific calibration. I'm suggesting you stop treating every plant like it came from your backyard. Harish made a low sound in its thoracic cavity. You apply intuition where we apply analysis. Sometimes intuition gets there faster. Your input has altered 3 separate growth metrics, Harish admitted, checking the data readout. This is statistically significant. Quentin gave a small shrug. Guess I'm not completely useless. You remain inefficient, but occasionally useful. Another hour passed. Quentin examined leaf textures, adjusted humidity levels, and tried unsuccessfully to explain the concept of compost to a junior technician who recoiled when he mentioned decomposing banana peels. By midshift, he was seated beside a tray of earth basil, its leaves curling inward. He pressed a knuckle into the soil and frowned. It's too alkaline now, he muttered. You adjusted the water content earlier, Harish said. Yeah, and now the pH decays off. Gotta balance it. He reached for a small container of buffering agent and paused. You have a stirring rod, he asked. Harish handed over a long, narrow implement that looked suspiciously surgical. Close enough, Quentin said, mixing the solution and pouring it carefully. The basil leaves perked up within minutes. Harish seemed to hesitate. You refused sedation during your foot injury. Quentin blinked. That's a jump. You also refused synthetic emotional dampeners after the cavern incident. I didn't see the point. I wasn't panicked. You were in pain. I was focused. Harish regarded him silently. Your species often chooses discomfort, not on purpose. It's just part of how we learn, through harm, sometimes, not ideal, but it sticks. Harish tapped at the panel, then looked back. We have been compiling psychological profiles. You do not fit any of the projected categories. Good, Quentin said. I'd hate to be predictable. You demonstrate an aversion to assistance, even when injured. I don't mind help. I just don't like being treated like I'm fragile. You are fragile. Thanks for the pep talk, Harish paused, yet you recover. Without augmentation, we manage, Harish straightened. Your presence is disruptive but not detrimental. I'll take that as a compliment. No. The following day, Quentin returned to the lab early. Harish was already there, adjusting nutrient dispersal rates for an experimental fungus that emitted a faint glow. You are early, Harish said, not looking up. Didn't sleep much. Discomfort? No, just thinking, Harish turned. About how you guys always try to avoid failure. Like it's the worst thing that can happen. That is accurate. I think failure's how we figure things out. Harish moved a tray aside. Explain? When I was a teenager, Quentin said, leaning on the console, I tried to fix a lawnmower engine, took the whole thing apart. Got it back together, missed a washer. The thing seized up and caught fire. That is not an acceptable outcome. It wasn't at the time, but I learned how combustion works better than any textbook could have taught me. You risked property and safety for experience. I didn't mean to. But I remembered it. Harish tilted its head. You accept damage as part of growth. Not ideal, he repeated, but yeah, you are not inherently reckless. Merely tolerant of consequence. That's a fancy way of saying we mess up a lot and keep going. Harish adjusted the fungus temperature setting. This is contrary to Vireem ethics. We optimize preemptively. That's admirable. But sometimes, you only know what works by seeing what doesn't. Harish was quiet for a long moment. You would not be permitted to operate in a Vireem emergency response unit. Fair. But you would be consulted afterward. I'll take it. As the shift ended, Quentin glanced at the basil tray. It was upright now, leaves smooth and vibrant. He tapped a leaf lightly and smiled. Harish watched him. You feel satisfaction from minor success. Of course, that's how we get through the day. You do not require large victories, we like those too, but sometimes just keeping a plant alive is enough. Harish nodded once. You have completed your observation allotment. You may return to your quarters. Quentin stood and stretched. Appreciate the hospitality. Harish paused. You adjusted to our systems without instruction. You interpreted unfamiliar variables without training. You tolerated discomfort without complaint. That's just a Tuesday. You are not what we expected. That's what everyone says. As he stepped through the doorway, Harish called out once more. Quentin, he turned. You continue to limp. It's habit now. You could request assistance, I know. He left the lab, the door sealing behind him with a soft hiss. The corridor was quiet, the lights dimmed for the rest phase. He walked with a slight favor to his left side, but without hesitation. In his quarters, he set the basil clipping Harish had given him beside the viewport. The stars outside shimmered like ice scattered across black velvet. His foot still twinged when he pivoted sharply, but he didn't mind. Some things stay sore longer than they need to. That didn't mean they weren't healing. He sat down, exhaled, and for the first time in weeks, didn't feel like a curiosity in a petri dish. Just a guy who'd stubbed his toe, helped some plants grow, and maybe taught a few aliens that resilience wasn't a flaw in the system. It was the system, and that, for Quentin Nash, was enough.